Sorry, Evan, I stepped away for a second. What's going on?
That's okay, Steve. I just emailed the meeting link to the mayor and council and all the department heads. So they're going to start popping on now, and we'll see what happens there.
Everyone's trying to. When do you start recording?
Well, I'm not going to do it. Yeah, you go right ahead. Oh, look.
Evan, it says we're streaming live.
All right, yeah, so a heads up,
Yep.
everybody, we're live on YouTube right now. I
Now
managed
on.
to get it working through a lot of finagling, so just, we are live.
Councilor Garcia, are you in the room?
All right. Once we see everybody.
Councilor Garcia, are you in the room?
Looks like Councilor Garcia's may be frozen. Yeah, there's two Councilor Garcias. There you go. Now there's one. Ooh, I was scaring me for a minute.
Sorry, Councilor, I didn't see you.
Waiting for Councilor Sorrento.
Councilor Sorrento will just be a moment. He's switching up to come and get some Wi-Fi connection over here. Okay.
Okay. So we can still proceed because we got to get through some of the general parts of the meeting once we go live. So he can catch up when we get there. Okay, I'll look to the clerk when she's ready. So Councilor Garcia, he's going to join for some more Wi-Fi, but we can continue on. When we have the rest of council on.
You're on page 3.
Okay, so are we live? So we're live streaming and everything?
Yes, we managed to get it on the live stream. The live stream has a bit of a weird name just because it took some finagling to get it. So it's called New Council Meeting Link on our YouTube, but it is live and we'll change that once it's done to the correct name to reflect the date. So Evan's the meeting host, but I managed to get it working through my internet connection. So I'm just going to leave it running in the background. Really quickly, how far had you guys gotten in the agenda before?
We just approved the minutes.
All right, perfect. Just because we had some requests on social media, of certain items people wanted to see, so I wanted to make sure the public would be able to see those for transparency's sake. So
Just so that
thank you
people
very much,
don't think-
guys. I'll leave it to you.
Hey, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Oh, hi, I'm Steve Henschel, Corporate Communications Officer, the guy who was stressing about the live stream. So hi, everybody. Bye, everybody.
Thanks,
The
Steve.
public doesn't need to see me, guys. I'm not a face man, so.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, so we are now live. And for the public, I just want to reiterate, I'm just going to start with the manager. just kidding. I'm not going to do the manager. We've just gone through, we've gone through nothing that would be deemed of debate. We went through the agenda approval. We went through the motions for the minutes from the previous meetings. And then we went in camera, of which the public can't come anyway. We made discussion in camera, and there will be a vote proceeding forward on that near the end of the meeting. And then we were just coming back in to start what is now the general committee. And so you're all up to date. No big decisions have been made. You haven't missed anything. Your popcorn might be cold, but that's about it. So a motion to move reports on consent. So we're at the consent agenda level, and we've had one request to pull, which is the Niagara District Airport support for Airports Capital Assistance Program by Councillor Townsend. And the rest, I'll look to the Councillor Phillips. You'll be making the motion on consent. Where is Councillor Phillips? Is he not on yet?
Councillor Phillips is still not on the meeting. He's just having some difficulty, but the Deputy City Clerk is reaching out to him right now to assist with getting him on the call, along with, I believe, Councillor Dodge and Councillor Kushner. So the Deputy Clerk's working with them right now.
Okay. So
You want to pick a new mover, Mr. Mayor?
yeah, so Councillor Littleton, seconded by Councillor Townsend. And again, this is just for the consent agenda, and the clerk's going to read the consent agenda items. The schedule for rates and fees, that is just so that we can host a public meeting at a future date. So this is not for discussion. We're not just passing it without discussion. To the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this evening's consent agenda is item 2.1, financial management services from the director, budget standing committee report, meeting of June 15, 2020. Item 2.2, financial management services from the director, 2021, schedule of rates and fees, and that's to hold a public meeting. And item 2.3 is legal and clerk services, office of the city clerk, council correspondence, save and accept, sub-item 2, which is the letter from the Niagara District Airport pulled by Councillor Townsend. Councillor Phillips, are you in the room?
Yep. Yes, he is.
Yes. Do you vote yes for the consent agenda? Okay. I'll move on and I'll go back to Councillor Phillips.
Yes, I do.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
He's probably still waiting.
Okay.
The same problem I had.
Okay. Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge. Councillor Dodge.
Waiting to get on to.
Okay. Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
He's
Councillor
waiting.
Townsend. Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Senzik.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Okay, before the COVID update, so to the council coordinator, we're missing Councillor Dodge, Councillor Sorrento, and Councillor Kushner. Seems to have his image blacked out, so he seems to be there, but
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe that might be a device that wasn't activated yet. I'm just looking at it. There's video, but no microphone. So it might just be a connectivity issue. So we're going to reach out to him to get that sorted out.
okay. Let's see who else we got. See who else we got coming on. I don't see Gavin Fearon. Is he on? He's not on yet either. Okay. If it's the will of council, can we proceed forward with the CAO update? So it's just for a report for information. I'm seeing some nodding of the head. Okay, so
Yeah.
we are being recorded. So we'll go to the CAO. If she would like to start with the overview.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Nice that we've got this far today. Okay, today's discussion agenda includes a sixth update to council regarding city services and activities during the COVID-19 pandemic. Last meeting's report focused on our plan for recovery, and as we move forward through the remainder of this year, our COVID update reports will serve to further refine that recovery plan and begin discussion on increasing our resiliency for future waves of the pandemic and/or future similar challenges. Last week, Niagara was given the green light as the province announced the region will be allowed to reopen businesses and services. And as we've heard already in the mayor's report on Friday, June 19th, we entered stage 2 of the second phase of Ontario's reopening plan. At a summarized level, what this means is that many businesses shuttered by pandemic emergency orders can reopen. We've provided a general list in the report, but hoping that many of you are already familiar with the list and are seeking ways to safely support these businesses in their road to recovery. In addition, a number of our outdoor amenities can now open as well. As you're aware, our report last meeting estimated that July 1st would be the date of our entry into stage 2. Reality is more positive outcome that we reached that stage just under 2 weeks early. Senior leadership team reviewed our recovery plan, an exercise that in practicality will likely be doing regularly for the foreseeable future, and have adjusted some of the dates in the plan. Specifically on page 5 of the report, we've provided a chart with details. And you can see that in your report. In particular, the beaches, we had a partial opening on this past Friday, but really the full opening will be June 26th, where our washrooms will be open to coincide with Niagara Region posting beach monitoring and water quality results. Victoria Lawn Cemetery or Mausoleum open. Splash pads will remain the same date as July 1st. Garden City Golf Course, there's further information in the report as an opening date of July 6th. Individuals booking must book tea times, no cash payments, snacks, beverages sold, and grow will not open. Our playgrounds are still closed. Play structures and equipment, gyms, and large indoor and outdoor gatherings are not yet able to proceed. Use of many of our reopened amenities still require that 2 meters of physical distancing unless you're part of the same household, and this is still enforceable. So despite the province lifting restrictions, the senior leadership team continues to look at opening city facilities with both a financial and safety lens in the forefront. At this time, city administrative facilities that provide services to the public, like City Hall, Buchanan House, will remain closed to the public until further notice and continue to provide services through our modified service delivery mechanisms. While we're bringing ourselves to full service delivery from these buildings, we'll be providing those services electronically as much as possible. We would like to build on the access improvements achieved during the last number of months and offering many of our more services in modified forms. Many customers have welcomed these changes, but we recognize that for some customers and for some services, in-person service is still necessary. As always, we're committed to ensuring that we serve all our customers in an exemplary manner. We encourage everyone to look to our Engage SDC web platform to learn how to access city services. If, however, they can't find what they're looking for or wish to talk to our staff, Citizens First is there to help and we'll make it work for all of them. Though we haven't chosen a specific opening date for our administrative offices, we're in the process of implementing all the necessary safety protocols and working towards an opening later in the summer. To guide us, we have the excellent examples of both Fire Services and Municipal Works Department that have continued providing those essential in-person services, both out in the field and in our office spaces throughout the pandemic. It's about finding balance between providing services to the community and being fiscally responsible. And as we go down the path of recovery, the financial position will continue to be reviewed, and the year-end position at this point, of course, still remains unfavorable. Staff will continue to request that we receive assistance from upper levels of government. The recovery team is working with various departments to prepare and reopen certain facilities. Stage 2, it includes large sports complexes like the McCaffrey Park and Kiwanis Field, splash pads, and Victoria Lawn Cemetery. City staff continue to prepare facilities for eventual reopening and will do so when they feel it's safe and responsible to. The city is also examining ways it can provide support to businesses as they begin to reopen under Stage 2. Staff have been working closely with individual businesses and the BIA to provide them an opportunity to operate given the restrictions outlined by the province. This has resulted in staff working with the BIA to close parts of St. Paul Street temporarily to allow for expanded use of patios, increasing the number of residents and customers restaurants can service. Staff also continue to update pickupsdc.ca, which promotes products and services of over 200 businesses and has seen over 50,000 page views. Staff will continue to work with the business community to identify innovative ways to service our residents under this new normal. Provincial emergency orders require the person responsible for operating business to take all reasonable precautions in the circumstances to protect the health and safety of their staff and customers. In many cases, the regulations to follow are many, and all of them are new. We're working with area businesses to help them through. Patience on our part is important as they face new challenges and seek to bring themselves to financial health and ultimately building more successful, resilient businesses. We look both to council and the public to help us in this effort. We work together to stay safe during the early days of the pandemic and hope that that spirit continues through to the end. I have a number of updates, just general ones from some of our partners. City has been working closely, as you know, with the transit and library to streamline the recovery process and work as a unified front through the pandemic. For the library, as of June 19th, the province indicated libraries are now eligible to reopen with limited on-site services such as computer access. The library is working towards relocating public computers and furniture to ensure social distancing and to revise its computer use guidelines to address capacity restrictions and enhance their cleaning procedures. Public computer service will be made available at the Central Library in July. And starting on July 6th, pickup service will also be available at the Merritt Branch on Hartzell Road. Regarding our transit services, St. Catharines Transit will be returning to service on a half-hour frequency effective Sunday, June 28th. And the service will return to front door boarding on June 29th with the resumption of fare collection on July 1st, 2020. All transit facilities will reopen to the public on June 29th, 2020. We have a number of specific areas to update council and the public today. And for these updates, we'll switch to our speakers up a little bit. We'll hear first from Deputy CAO David Oakes regarding Morningstar Mill and our beaches. And following that, Director Kate has an update regarding the patio application procedure that we implemented in the last number of weeks. So if I can move over to Mr. Oakes, please.
Thanks, Kelly. I will be brief. I know we're fighting time here tonight. So the mayor had indicated a bit of an update on Morningstar Mill at the beginning of the meeting. Just to give council a sense of some of the issues we were dealing with. The last 4 weeks, particularly, we've seen a significant increase in folks from outside of the region coming to use the trail, use the facility, and do so in a way that doesn't necessarily respect the property or the rules as it relates to health and safety. So people were going off trail, putting themselves in very precarious situations. We had a series of fire calls and emergency rescues that had to happen. All of that takes away our staff from other things that they need to be doing. So the decision was made last week in consultation with the senior leadership team, as well as our partner, City of Thorold, because a lot of the issues have been happening on the Thorold roadway when we deal with cars parking in areas they shouldn't be parking, which was causing other safety concerns for the emergency vehicles to be able to get through. So as of Friday, the decision was made to close the facility. The trails are still open. People can access the trails. There's multiple access points, but the facility itself is not open for a temporary point. And the idea is to hopefully, when Toronto gets into their stage 2 of their, and they open up some more of their areas, the demand will start to lessen. So this is also allowing us the opportunity to work with the province and the city of Thorold on a plan to increase signage and better, hopefully look at some significant safety concerns along the trail. And we're just working right now on a strategy to present back to the ministry staff to review. So as of now, the park is closed. We have been dealing with Thorold, working on ticketing, parking tickets. We did see this weekend an abundance of people still wanting to come into the facility. They've moved their cars further down the queue. So our parking and enforcement have been dealing with that situation. It's really people have been in their houses for a long time and they're trying to get out, but there's also a point where you need to respect the parks and the amenities, and when they're leaving garbage and other things on the trail, in the parking lot, in the waterways, it's just not a healthy environment. So the decision was made. We will continue to update council as we move forward on that plan. With regards to the beaches, as the mayor and CAO had mentioned, we did have a partial opening. And you'll note in the framework for recovery, we always had the June 26th date. So the reason why we didn't have the full operation was there's a staff recall that's happening right now. We just don't have the number of staff ready to go for this past weekend, hence the washrooms and some of the other issues that we saw. Again, people were, overwhelming, not only St. Catharines, this is something that happened all throughout Ontario. The weather, the combination of the excitement of moving into phase 2 created a lot of interest in all of our parks, all of the beaches. So that the associated issues that we had to deal with were faced across the region for the municipalities that also had beaches, as well as Toronto. So as we move to June 26th, we will have more staff and the beaches will be groomed to a higher caliber than what they were this past weekend. But I will reiterate, we still aren't at our full complement and we won't be as compared to previous years. So there is going to be the levels of service that you see or the public sees will not be the same as what it has been in the past. Thanks.
Okay, with regards to temporary patios, the city had anticipated that the stage 2 reopening would allow a greater variety of businesses, including restaurants and bars, to reopen. We were also cognizant that occupancy limits would be restricted based on COVID-19 physical distancing protocols. I'd like to thank staff from the Planning and Building Services, Legal, Clerks, Fire, Economic Development, and EFES who collaborated together and quickly mobilized in an effort to assist our hospitality operators. A brand new process, application form, design guidelines, agreement, and website was quickly established and communicated to interested parties. For those interested in learning more, please visit www.stcatharines.ca/temporary patios. The process is conducted entirely online and there's no cost to the applicant as council previously waived the review fees. A dedicated staff team meets every day to review applications and issue same-day permits where possible. To date, we've received 24 patio extension applications. We are pleased with the uptake and appreciate the positive feedback from applicants who have reached out to acknowledge our city staff for championing this effort.
To the CAO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's the completion of our report this evening.
Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question of Deputy CEO Oakes regarding Morningstar Mill. I'm trying to understand there was a big safety concern in terms of fire services having to rescue people from the borders, and there being careless as addressing that safety situation?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I caught you. You were a little, your audio was off a little bit, but if I understand the gist, we talked about closing the facility, but the trails are still open, so those safety issues are still out. You're right. However, what we were seeing is the people who are accessing, in particular, the Bruce Trail or some of the other, the Lower Secord Trail that does connect in through, know the trails well. They're either members of groups or they follow the various networks, so they understand the type of trail that they're going on. What we've been experiencing in the last 3-4 weeks is people are coming to the site and they're very unaware, very unprepared in terms of how the type of footwear. People are wearing flip-flops, you know, and they're going down a path that's not actually a path. That's causing some significant concerns. The Bruce Trail Association and Network are aware of the situations as well, so they've been putting communication on their website. But the point of closing the facility was human nature. Is basically somebody if they get stuck down in the gorge, they want to get back to their car, and we want to be able to stop that tendency for people for that to happen, but at the same time increase our communication in terms of the type of trail use, and make sure you're prepared. People are prepared to. You're going to go for a hike, you should be dressing for it, and there is common sense. There are signage that tells you not to go in certain areas. People choose to do so, and that's the decision why we made for closing the mill site itself, but the trail network is still open. The signage, we're going to continue to improve the signage and work with the province to do that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Garcia. So I don't see any further questions on the, any other questions or no? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, there's a few councillors who have used the raised hand tool.
Yeah, switched over to that. Councillor Miller, you're up.
Yeah, just I'll try to be as brief as possible. Just with regards to something like the splash pads, like how are we enforcing or monitoring physical distancing at our splash pads?
I'll look to first the CIO, I guess. CIO is going to have to direct this one around the.
Yeah, I think Director Christie was attempting to enter in. Phil, remember your second mute button.
Yes, thank you. Got it now. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we will have staff on site, and we will be working with the public to ensure that we have the appropriate number of folks within the circumference or the area of the splash pad.
So in a situation, I'm just imagining the situation will be similar to beaches, you know, especially the weather. I know the weather's supposed to get a little bit cooler, but it'll still be hot. What do we do in a situation where we're overcrowded at a splash pad?
Well, we've thought of through you, Mr. Mayor. We've thought of different scenarios where that might happen, and we fully expected that it could. So first of all, we're going to try to have more than one staff, especially early days at every location. And if we have a large number of people waiting to get on because of the cap that we would place at every splash pad. So first of all, the cap, the maximum number of folks allowed on every splash pad will be different. Will be site specific because they're all of different sizes. We may go to timed limits, so we may have rotations of 20 minutes or half an hour or whatever, what have you. We're going to try and work with the crowd and the folks that are attending, and hopefully we get cooperation from folks. We did consider other options such as fencing and things like that. We just at the end of the day, wanted to be able to present the splash pad in the safest possible way, and we think that this approach will allow us to do that. So staffing on site, multiple staffing on site, and lots of communication with folks who are attending the sites.
Okay, well, I mean, I think it's good they're opening. My heart goes out to those staff members. I think they're going to be working pretty hard in pretty stressful conditions, but you know, we'll see how it goes. That's the way things are now. Just staying with staffing, but on the golf course, what just because it's a little bit different of a facility, obviously, than typical parks and things like that. What are we calling back specific staff to work on the courses who've worked there before, or are we still sort of going by the list in terms of who we've laid off and who we're bringing back?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So all the staff have been called back. We will be rotating staff that have worked at the golf course previously to the golf course. And as we get our casual employees back, those casuals that worked at the golf course before will also be rotated into that golf course location.
Okay, thank you. Just two more short things. Just on the patios. I don't know if director could take it to answer this, but maybe Mr. York. Just with regards to licensing, are those areas, those expanded areas when the roads are closed on those weekend periods, are those available to be licensed? And I know like the AGCO is trying to make it easier, I think, to expand licensing, but is that the plan for when St. Paul Street specifically is closed?
Okay, so I'll start through you, Mr. Mayor. The point of closing the street is to increase pedestrian access and get people off of the curb and off of the sidewalk so that the businesses can expand out there, and we're seeing great success with it, as Director Katea said. So the intent would be to continue to use it as a pedway to allow emergency vehicles to be able to get down that road allowance should something happen. So the idea wasn't to allow them to expand into the road allowance at this point. It's something that we could consider, but again, our fire chief and EFES and Municipal Works would have to comment on whether we could get it down to one lane or what the impact on the public would be if we were to do that.
Thank you. I guess I can sort of roll less. Just I know that CEO touched on the safety. If maybe the fire chief could just comment on what the measures are going to be in place for those pedestrian close-offs from Friday to Sunday on St. Paul.
Mr. Mayor, so the idea is that there will be barricades that close the streets. The barricades will be manned in the event that emergency services, police, fire, or ambulance needs to get through. The barricades can be open to allow the flow of traffic. Through the planning and building department, there's been provisions for distancing the patios from the roadway, requirements to delineate what the patios are, and then there will be obviously onus on the patio owners to make sure that their people are in the areas that they've been given permission to use, and no further than that.
Sorry, we're gonna have staff on the barriers the entire time they're up. Is that what you mean, or just like who's gonna be there if all of a sudden fire, ambulance, whatever needs to access that site?
So the idea is if the plans move forward, the Downtown Business Association is going to be providing volunteers to man the barricades and to look after that, which is the normal provisions when a special event permit is issued.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's it for me. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Miller, Councillor Williamson, and Councillor Cisco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to, I guess, the CAO. And apologies if I missed this. Pool openings, what have we decided on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, with our recovery report last week, staff had determined that the pools would not open this summer.
Okay, thank you. And the mausoleum at the cemetery?
That has opened, I believe, on Saturday now with posted signs as to what the capacity is opening, and there are hours on it. I believe it's in the report. I can't recall the specific times, but it is open now.
Okay, so I'm a little busy with year-end stuff right now. Welland Canal Parkway, I've raised the issue separate. I know Councillor Townsend talked about perhaps closing up a section of it, at least on weekends, but the issue of cyclists not complying with social distancing, just flying past pedestrians directly on the trail. Have we thought about doing something more proactive to avoid this conflict, which I started raising back in March?
Director Martuccio, I see his hand raised there.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, staff have looked into closing sections of the Welland Canal Parkway. Their focus has been on the closing of St. Paul Street to allow businesses to expand, but that is the next thing that we are looking at, allowing for additional space for cyclists and pedestrians along Welland Canal Parkway.
Yeah, and I think enforcement's really important because I don't think people understand that they're not complying when they're flying by families with little kids and stuff that are walking. One more on DQ Falls. There is a chain link fence. Is there a possibility of extending the chain link fence through you to the Director of Fire Services, Mr. Mayor?
On our property, so I'll go.
Or to whoever. Well, so whoever, wherever we can do it to if we could prevent some falls there. Just wondering if a simple chain link fence might avoid some of these problems.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, what we're finding, Councillor, is that the further you extend the fence, the people just go to where the fence ends and then start to climb down and make a new path. So again, part of the problem is it's not St. Catharines property, so we don't have the right to install a fence either. But what I can say is when the fence was extended previously, it just changed the access point. The problem is, I think that people are following the trail and following an easier path when they get down and come to the falls, and they realize it's a kilometer or more hike, and then they want to look for shortcuts to get back to the parking lot at Morningstar Mill, and so that's when they start coming up the embankment and get themselves in trouble. We're not seeing people fall down the embankment. It's people are deliberately going down there and then having problems getting back up, and or are injuring themselves because of the rough terrain at the bottom of the embankment that, again, until you get there, you have no idea what's there. And that's part of the problem. And I think the mayor alluded to that, or sorry, Deputy CAO Oakes alluded to that. You have the regular trail users that know the dangers, that know the pitfalls, and then you have tourists and visitors are completely unfamiliar with what they're getting into.
Thank you. Times have changed. I went on school trips to that site, if you can imagine that, in elementary school. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CEO, last question. With the opening up, if we see an increase in the number of positive COVID identified people, will we act independently on our own to pull back on some of these openings to protect local residents separate from what the province may tell us what to do or not tell us what to do?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly, that's a recognition that the experience in the overall province and in fact in the overall Niagara region may be different from our individual experience here. Our Community Emergency Management Coordinator does attend meetings with the coordinators from the region, and certainly if there are issues from public health where we see things that we will certainly within our control group look and see. Hopefully we will be provided with adequate information for us to see what will be effective, right? We'll hesitate to move towards shutting down businesses, et cetera, again, but we will look at our own facilities and see if we're contributing to the problem should one arise again. And we do anticipate that cases will begin to rise again. So that is something that we've been planning for and something that we've looked at from the beginning, because we had to contract our services very quickly at the outset. We did what we had to do very quickly. The next time it comes, should it come again, we want to make sure we're more efficient and more targeted in what we do, but we will keep an eye on that, yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Got a lot of hands up. Okay, so Councillor Miller, you're done. Councillor Williamson, Councillor Cisco, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to start off and just thank staff for the work on the temporary patio permits. I know a number of downtown businesses have availed themselves of that, and I was involved with a couple of the businesses, and while this entire situation has been frustrating, ultimately those businesses were pretty happy with the way the patio permit process rolled out. and the flexibility that staff gave to be able to get the information in and get up and running quickly. So I want to thank staff for that. We've talked a little bit about the street closure at St. Paul, and I know that the Downtown Association has said that there will be a street closure from Ontario Street to Carlisle for this coming weekend. When we had originally discussed the street closure, the intent had been all the way from Ontario to Geneva, but staff have made clear, and I recognize the need for the area from Carlisle to Academy to still be open to allow for Niagara Regional Transit and other transit buses to be able to get in and out. But with the area from Academy to Geneva, so the less improved end of St. Paul Street, there are a number of businesses and organizations that are there who are very much hoping that that part of the street will be closed. So I was wondering through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CAO, if the area from Academy to Geneva will be closed.
Through Mr. Mayor, I will defer to the team. I think we'll start out with Brian York as far as the discussions that they've had and the concerns that you've raised.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly, we're supportive of closing that stretch, and we've come to the conclusion that Academy up to Geneva is the way to go. We do have some contract work that perhaps Director Martuccio can expand on if I don't get it all right. But I know we have some contractor work that's going to finish up in that stretch in the next 2 weeks. And we also need to have a final discussion with the region on what that closure would look like, given that it does impact their road work area. So we're supportive. There's also a challenge around staffing and cost to close that section. So one of the challenges we're up against is that the BIA, while their membership base extends down to that end, they still only have 2 staff. So they're trying to actively recruit to manage what they think they can control with the budget and staffing resources they're able to recruit. So starting with phase 1 and then moving into phase 2 over the next couple of weeks, we think that that's something that we could achieve.
Okay, so then we're confident that this is something that we can achieve?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly perhaps Director Smith can expand on the costing that we would likely need some approval to support that effort.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So part of the discussions that we're having with the BIA is what support that they can give us with respect to staffing the barricades. And that will have an implication with respect to how those barricades are dealt with in both sections, the original section from William to Carleton and the northern section from Academy to Geneva. Once we have that input from the BIA, we can then finalize what other things that we need to do from the municipal side to make sure that those barricades are safe and that we can control the accesses for emergency vehicles and ensure that they're not being moved in vehicles mixing with the pedestrians, which would obviously be the worst case scenario.
So we're confident that we can overcome those challenges?
Well, I mean, it's a matter of staffing and budget. And the worst case scenario, if we have to staff all of the barricades for the entire closure, so meaning city staff, and not having any volunteer help from the BIA, you're looking at a cost of about $19,000 every weekend.
Okay, so that was the question that I was going to follow up with. Do other municipalities have the same requirements when it comes to on-street barricades? Because I know a number of other municipalities are doing the same thing that we're doing. So I'm just wondering, are they facing the same costs as we are?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my staff reached out to a bunch of municipalities to get their input on what they do. And there was only one municipality, being Peterborough, that did not require the barricades to be staffed. Every single other municipality required staffing of the barricades for at least through streets, and in some cases all streets. We did have a meeting with the project team in Kingston today to discuss their particular closure issues, And they have now actually, because of the logistical problems, have actually walked back their closure. And they're actually only going to close one lane of the road now and provide one-way traffic on the other way, because that obviously assists with the logistical issues of the emergency access and maintaining staff at the barricades.
Now, do we maintain staff at every barricade when we put up a barricade on a street?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so we are required when we close the street for special events that the barricades be staffed, whether that's done through the organization that's doing the special event or done through the city.
Okay, but I guess what I'm asking is, I understand the special events, but in other cases, and I'll use as an example, we barricaded parking lots for city parks and the city beaches over the last couple of months. Did we have staff there at those barricades in the event that an emergency vehicle needed to get into those parking lots?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, we did not have staff at those barricades, but it's not just the emergency vehicle access. It is also ensuring that the barricades aren't being moved and traffic mixing with the pedestrians that we're allowing on the roadway. When you're talking a parking lot, it's a completely different use.
Yep.
And so it wasn't considered that we would have to staff those barricades.
So then if that's the concern, I just want to finish my thought. If that's the concern, would we be able to perhaps retask someone from Cantech to be able to maintain the integrity of the roadway, as you said? And I understand that concern about traffic mixing if people were to move the barricades. But could we not then retask one of our Cantech security guards who are in the downtown and are dealing with a number of the different areas in the downtown? Could we have them fulfill part of that function, and would that reduce the cost significantly?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it would depend on who is actually running the barricade. If we are doing the closures, being municipal works and city staff, then the manning of the staff would be work of the union under the collective bargaining agreement, and we would have to deal with that. It does not mean we couldn't do some discussions and have the security staff working that, but there is some CBA consequences of that. The best case scenario is if the BIA takes this on and then it does not become a city road closure. And in that case, that widens our options as to how we can staff and maintain those barricades.
And I'm in full agreement with that. I think the best case scenario would be for the Downtown Association to provide that service for their members at that end of the street as well. Because I know there are a number of members of the DTA that are reaching out specifically and asking for the same treatment there as the other half of St. Paul Street. I guess I'm hopeful that we can ensure that we're not leaving any stones unturned. I know that there are a couple of organizations that are looking to animate the street past Academy and that want to be involved with this, but I think we have to offer that opportunity. I've really pushed, and when we originally talked about this idea of closing St. Paul, I think I'm not going to speak for Councillor Porter, but I think we were both in agreement that that end of St. Paul has started to become a busier sector, especially cultural sector for the downtown. There are a number of new businesses down there, and we haven't put the same resources in terms of public building and infrastructure work into the area of St. Paul closer to Geneva than we did between Ontario and Carlisle. And so the businesses and the folks in between Ontario and Carlisle have received a great deal of benefit, obviously not just from public spending, but from the private spending that came along with it over the last 10 years. But I think we need to do everything we can to also help the downtown businesses on the other side of Carlisle. And I would hope that the Downtown Association is able to find a way to do this. But if not, then I really hope we find a way to absolutely minimize the costs associated with this, because I think it's important, and I think that there's an opportunity here. But if we let it go by the wayside, that'll be very frustrating for us, but I think in some cases, potentially devastating for some of the businesses. Other municipalities seem to be able to do this, and I really hope we can find a way to make it happen for downtown. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Could I weigh in here for a second, Mr. Mayor?
Yep, to the chief.
Apologies, Chief, yes.
So through you, Mr. Councilor Cisco. So one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that when we look at what other cities are doing, some other cities may be dealing with a one street where they can cement barricade at one end of the street, which effectively closes the street. It's a short, no side streets have to be closed, and fire trucks or emergency vehicles can come up a one-way street the other way. But what's unique about us here in St. Catharines is that St. Paul Street from Station 1 leads through to the Burgoyne Bridge, which is our only way in that area across a canal, or across a roadway and a waterway. So we have to take that into consideration too, that some of the municipalities aren't dealing with how to the bridge that moves emergency vehicles into a neighborhood in a quick time frame. So again, when we look at, if we close the significant portion of the street, means that many more barricades have to be in place. That means that many more barricades have to be moved to allow emergency vehicles. So that has a tremendous effect on emergency response time. So that's something that, again, is a little bit unique, the makeup of the way our road structure works in that area.
So, Chief, if I can ask then, just with respect to that, would McGuire not likely be a faster route to the Burgoyne Bridge than coming down St. Paul? I mean, St. Paul is a very narrow street. It has a fair amount of both vehicle, pedestrian traffic, and parking. But if you were able to go through the intersection and go down McGuire, that would take you in a straight shot to St. Paul West just before the Burgoyne Bridge. Wouldn't that be a better route for emergency vehicles?
So again, for fire trucks that heavy, a straight route is always the easiest and safest route because you're not going around corners, that sort of stuff. So you're not having to worry about trying to get around, making left-hand turns around traffic. So the most direct route is always the easiest route for fires.
Chief, God bless you, but you might be the first person in the history of St. Catharines to describe St. Paul as a straight street. But I understand your point. But I feel like we could get around that by using McGuire. But I think I've made my point, and I appreciate the input, Chief. And I apologize for missing you because I know you wanted to jump in there. But anyways, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cisco. Councillor Littleton, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll go very quickly. I just had a couple of questions on page 6, the first paragraph. We're talking about the patios. Do you think it's possible, this is probably through you to the director of ECDEV, do you think it's going to be possible to look at other streets, perhaps side streets for closing to expand patios?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have seen interest from other business owners on the side streets in the downtown who've requested closure. At this point, both the BIA and staff agree that some of those parking spaces are better suited for curbside to allow you to access, and those streets are also required for relief. And I think it's something we could entertain. Perhaps an overall statement, we want to get this right. So piloting the project on a rolling basis. So starting with what we think we can manage today is probably the best we can do or should do. And to an earlier point made that other cities are getting it right. Others are doing it and announcing it. I don't think anybody's gotten it perfect yet, and we're not going to wait for perfect, but a neighboring community did not get it right last week when council chose to close their streets on a Thursday evening. The decision was made, and Friday they shut it down with no barrier access or manning the access, and the businesses were quite unhappy. So they have to revisit the entire process. So we're open to other suggestions in other areas of the city. I know council has directed us to look at the Canals Parkway, perhaps the Facer area. We're open to those ideas. We want the businesses to lead that effort in bringing it forward and what it looks like.
Okay, thank you. I was thinking more of side streets here in Meriton, so I appreciate that. My second question is just a real quick one again in the third paragraph on that page 6. How many businesses have taken part in the webinar training?
Ooh, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's a great question. I'll ballpark it at hundreds. There's on average 30 plus people. Our Zoom license I think can have up to 200, 250 people in it. I don't think we've hit that level yet, but on a weekly basis, we're hosting these and we're seeing incredible uptake.
Oh, that's great. Okay, great. And on page 7 in the bullet points about the golf course, have we ever looked at volunteers? This is probably through the mayor to the director of municipal works, like the other city had. I believe it was Hamilton.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we are looking as part of the council direction at a whole bunch of suggestions that have come forward through the public and through an engagement. Unfortunately, with the pandemic this year and the strain that it's put on management staff, we haven't been able to address those suggestions, but we will be looking to address those suggestions going forward, and volunteers will be one of those things we'll be looking at.
Okay, thanks everybody. Great job. I know it's not an easy time at all, and your work is really appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Littleton. Councillor Sorrento.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to go back to Director Kite. When you mentioned that it was 24 applications, Director, is that 24 new applications for the extension of the patios?
Through the mayor to the councillor. Yes, that's correct. We have never offered a program such as this before, where we're looking at an extension of businesses into public right of way, particularly sidewalks. So it is 24 applications for new patio and expansions. This would not take into consideration restaurants and bars that have previously obtained, say, patios in the past through the site plan process or other development agreement processes. So this is a new number. This is a new uptake.
Okay, great. Mr. Mayor, again, to Director Kite or Director York, would you happen to know the total number of patios that we have? If you don't, that's fine, because it just seemed like the number was kind of low for the total number of patios. So just wanted to get clarification on that. I think you've answered that and I appreciate it. So, and I see your head shaking no, so that's fine. That's good. Okay. Mr. Mayor to Director York, was there a conversation about closing down Academy Street to Court Street with the executive? Because I don't recall that being discussed at the DTA at the Zoom meeting. So was there a conversation that took place between the executive and or the staff and ECDEV or the city to implement the closure for the other end of St. Paul Street?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, there was a discussion through the executive director, and then the ED had sent a message to the board looking for their support. They've come back with the same answer. We're limited resources, but we're willing to look at it if we can co-resource it or work out a plan that's satisfactory.
You're gonna have to, Mr. Mayor, get to the director, or you're gonna have to forgive me because I don't think I received that email. And I'll tell you quite honestly, it's very disconcerting considering I'm a council appointee to the board, and I don't even get this information now. I'm gonna vent a little bit. It's frustrating to say the least, and I'll just end it there. And I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but I didn't get the email. So when I hear Director Smith talking about a potential cost of $19,000, the hair on the back of my neck is starting to stand. At any rate, Mr. Mayor, my next question is to Fire Chief. Chief, my understanding is that when we close down the streets, any street closures, that one lane has to be free and clear so emergency vehicles can get through there, whether it's whatever end of St. Paul Street. So that's my understanding, because we had to do the same thing for Facer Street. So we couldn't have any vendors setting up on the other side of the street. So how would that play out? Would the city or the vendors have to leave at least one lane or half of the street free for emergency vehicles to access them in the event of an emergency?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct, Councillor. We would be limiting how much each side of the businesses on each side of the roadway could come out into the center of the street. We'd have to gain enough width to get a fire truck. Okay,
so let me ask this question. At the the street closure, the potential street closure between Academy Street and Court Street, there's a couple of restaurants across the street from one another, almost literally across the street from one another. If both of those restaurateurs wanted to extend their patios or put a patio out in front of their restaurants, would one not have that opportunity? Would one not get the opportunity to set that up? Because you have to have one lane totally free, as I understand it, Chief.
So again, I think that's the purpose of our permit committee meeting on a daily basis to discuss what works and what doesn't work. So that's putting planning, building, fire, economic development, everybody in the same meeting space at the same time to sort through those issues and determine what can and cannot be done.
Okay. My question is, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Cisco, you said that there were a number of businesses down at that end. I'm pretty familiar with that end of the street. I know that one in particular has an interest in setting up a patio. I think they did. And I think you said something like many businesses or several businesses. Can you tell us how many businesses were actually, can you give us a number? Was it 4, 5, 6?
The information that I've seen and the emails that I've been copied on, there's at least 4 or 5. A couple of, not necessarily restaurants, there's a couple of retail businesses at that end of the street, and a couple of I don't want to call them non-business, but organizations as opposed to businesses. But I know there's at least 4 or 5 that have been in discussion with one another, and they've talked to me about it.
Okay. And so they're looking at potentially putting a patio out in front of their businesses. Is that it?
Okay, so I'm going to jump in as chair. Sorry.
All right.
Yeah.
Councillor Cisco, we're getting way off topic. There's no decision being made tonight about what gets closed and what stays open. We were just, I think we need to move on because it's already almost 8:30. And
that's great. I've got one more question, Mr. Mayor, please. Okay, thank you. And my final question is to either Director Chemnitz or CEO Chemnitz or Director Smith. Director Smith, you said before that staff are returning. That's fantastic. So is that just for your department, or would that be all of our staff, all of our full-time staff are returning to either director? Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the directors. That's my last question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, as we open and bring our services back online, those employees who have been on temporary layoff will be returning to work. So over the course of the next little while, we're in the process. Each of the directors have looked at their operations and the timing of when they're instituting all their services back online and bringing their staff in accordingly.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Sorrento, and just as a follow-up for the Director of Economic Development, if there's an email from the Downtown Association, just to forward it to the representative of the Downtown Association so that he has information related to that, if possible. And next we have Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. I want to thank staff. They turned around some patio applications in 3 days, which I think is quite remarkable. And patio restaurants were able to open this weekend, and they're really struggling. So just having that 3-day turnaround to let them open on the weekend and get some money was huge. And it meant a lot. So I wanted to say thank you. And I know we're going to have some ongoing discussions about animating parts of St. Paul Street, the other parts if we can't close it, which I'm hoping we'll all be open to, maybe closing down some parking spaces. And I want to talk about pools quickly. I'm not sure if the public understands that pools won't be open. So we've made some choices. We chose to open facilities like a golf course, but we as a council have chosen to keep pools closed. And I'm not sure if the public understands this. So I have a question maybe to the CAO. Will there be a communication out to the public to let them know that pools won't be open, but what the alternatives are to cool off the splash pads and the beaches, and how to do so safely? I'm just assuming we're going to get a barrage of emails because the general public assumes the pools will be open when school is done, and I don't want people to have a shock.
Yes, thank you through Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we have had various communications and we will continue with the warmer weather here, as well as, you know, communications has had various blitzes as far as how to cool down, how to keep cool, and what amenities are available. And as we open, we will continue to get that message out there, also including the pools as being closed. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. And last up, Councillor Dodge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My questions are pertaining to the beach. We're opening, I guess, people are using the beaches now, but I guess we're supposed to have the washrooms and everything available on the 26th. Will we be having staff down at the beach at that time as well?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. We will be starting to staff the beaches up as of this Friday, and my cat is agreeing with what we're saying here. So
that's great. And also, I mean, when we're talking about like at splash pads and being able to limit people, will the same rule apply to the beach? Like this weekend, we've had like tremendous amount of traffic down here, lots of people, and they're, you know, overflowing into the neighborhoods again, taking, you know, their garbage with them and whatnot, and parking all over the place and making it very inconvenient for the people there. So would we be doing similar thing down at the beach? Like once we get to capacity, say, okay, you know what, we can't have any more people going down here, or how would we handle that?
through you, Mr. Mayor, it's a bit more difficult when you're defining the number of people allowed on a beach. So we will be working to enforce the provincial orders, which still require social distancing, and work with our staff that are going to be there. The one thing about having the staff actually stationed at the beaches is we'll be able to call in additional resources right away when we see a problem forming, and not have to wait to be notified of it by the public.
Okay, and also, is there a way that maybe we could get some more garbage receptacles down there and have them cleaned or like picked up more frequently, because there's such an abundance of garbage everywhere? And right now, without us having any washroom facilities, people are using the nature and around the building and whatnot. So it's not very clean in that aspect.
Yes, again, through you, Mr. Mayor, as we open the beaches, we'll be returning the garbage receptacles to the beach. We'll be doing, it wouldn't exactly be the same level of service that we had last year, but it will be closer to that level than it is the current level. So we will be picking up the garbage more frequently. We will have more garbage receptacles on the beach.
Okay, so just one quick last, is that starting now, or is that not really actually going into effect until the 26th?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's starting on the 26th. What staff are doing right now is grooming the beaches. So we'll be grooming the beaches the next 2 days. Then we'll be cleaning the bathrooms for the opening on Friday, and putting the garbage receptacles back. So that will all hit, so we can, I don't want to say flick a switch, but open things wide open on Friday the 26th.
Okay, and will parking enforcement be still a priority to be enforced down in that area?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we will work with parking enforcement, yes, and it will continue to be a priority in that system. But we are hoping, as the CAO said in her update, as Toronto opens up, we'll have less of a demand, and we'll be able to hopefully manage that a bit better going forward.
Okay, and just thank you to staff for helping me with all this. And I know Councillor Phillips is also happy with, you know, having this happen, helping us too.
All right, thank you, Councillor Dodge. So that wraps up the COVID-19 report. A lot of great questions and comments from both councillors and staff. And can I have a motion to receive the report regarding COVID-19 update? Councillor Cisco, seconded by Councillor Phillips. I'll look to the clerk. I think we could just do this as a regular vote because there's no decision making. All in favor, put up your hand. Okay, that's carried. Thank you. CAO, Office of the CAO, Deputy CAO David Oakes, you're up for the next discussion. And can we have the motion on the screen, please, from Evan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief again. This report's really providing council with an update on the status of the project, as well as a change that has occurred within the last few months, which is effectively moving the responsibility of the construction of the Canada Games Park in particular, which includes the arena facility, from the responsibility of the host society to the responsibility of Niagara Region. And the reason for the transition is included in the report. But the key points that we were highlighting is the host society was and is working to put together the games and put on the games, and a lot of their time and energy has been placed on the capital project. The consortium partnership that we have with Thorold, Niagara Region, Brock University, was always intended for us to, as we've reported in past reports, for us to own the facility. So at the time of the funding and the project itself, the consortium did not exist, and we've made monumental movements across all the partnerships. So it really is an opportunity to do the transfer earlier and ahead of schedule, to allow the consortium to take on the full responsibility of the construction of the games, which allows us to continue with the project management and the construction oversight of the project. So as we get into fit and finish, some of the fixtures and equipment that decisions that need to happen, they'll be resting with the consortium partners in consultation with the host society. So the way the project is moving forward, there's effectively 3 stages of construction. The first phase is intended to ensure that the track facility is ready for the games themselves. And Aquacon is currently on schedule to meet that deadline. The second phase is to have the facility, the building itself, ready for some of the other elements that may take place during the games, wrestling as an example, and lacrosse. That is to be completed by July 2021. And then the final phase is really the ice plant and having the arenas, and the target is the end of October of 2021, which again aligns with all of the timelines that we've been working towards. So this report is effectively looking for council to consent to this transition from the host society managing the construction to the Niagara Region, and we support it fully. We've been around the table for the last over a year, working on this project, and the team remains. Everything continues to move forward. So that's my brief overview, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you to the Deputy CAO. I've got Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with that transfer. I just had a couple of questions of the Deputy CAO through you on his report. I have always made the point when discussing approving funding for this project that I want to make sure that we have an agreement in place that limits and does not stick us with unending increasing operating deficits in the future. And I noticed in the report he says that those agreements have yet to be worked out. So I'm hoping that he feels confident that we can come up with some way that our taxpayers will be protected, that we don't end up with an albatross because of operating deficits continuing to increase year after year.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have been working, our legal team, our legal counsel, all the partners have been working on the agreement. So they aren't signed at this point, but they are as close to being signed. There's some last minute details that have to be incorporated. All of those assurances have been incorporated into the agreements. When we reported previously to council, the financial contribution on the capital side is capped in terms of what we are going to provide. But there is a positive operating impact of the facility once it's operational, and we are continuing to work towards that, and that's incorporated into some of the consortium agreements as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to the Deputy CAO. So when those agreements are finalized, will that come to council for approval or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, that authority has been delegated to myself and the solicitor. So those approvals have already been provided in the previous report. We have engaged an external legal counsel that's helping us through those as well. The documents themselves are quite significant. So there's been a lot of time and effort, and the solicitor may have some additional points to provide if she feels so.
No, it's all good. Councillor Garcia, are you fine?
Oh, okay. No. I thought the solicitor was going to say something. So I'll certainly trust the Deputy CAO and the solicitor to look after our taxpayers and ensure that we're protected that way. And I just had another question of the Deputy CAO through you, Mr. Mayor, and that is, when I read the report, it sounds like it is very tenuous in terms of having these facilities ready for the games, particularly buildings being completed. Is there a contingency plan as to what happens? Like, do the games happen no matter what, or what's the plan there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So there are protections in place for the contract of this facility. The specifics of the games themselves is really a matter of the host society, and they've been working through and with the provincial and federal government on managing that. As of now, everything is still committed to August 21. It has been confirmed that the games will never be canceled. So related to the pandemic, if they get delayed, they will be delayed, but they will never be canceled. So we'll never be put in a situation where they don't happen. But the schedule may change, and it would change to the latter. It would move further back if it were to happen. But that's a decision that would be made with. It's my understanding the provincial ministers of sport would make that determination in consultation with the host society.
Councillor Garcia, you finished?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips, do you have your hands up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To our Deputy CAO, at our last construction meeting, which was a very long time ago before this COVID happened, I made mention of, or I requested that we consider hiring a corporation to manage the facility once the consortium takes it over. Like we did that with the Meridian Center when we hired SMG long before it was completed, and it actually saved money during construction and made the building much more operational at the beginning. Has any more been discussed about that, and as far as going out to the market to hire an operator?
Through Mr. Mayor, yes. The focus in the last 6 months has really been on getting these agreements moved forward, as well as focusing on the construction. As we now take the next step, the intent, and it's included in the consortium agreement, it was always incorporated into our operating pro forma to have an operator come in and manage the facility. So there's a meeting scheduled, I believe, next week with just the consortium members to review sort of a terms of reference to go out to market for that.
That's good to hear. Sooner the better. Thank you. Thanks, David.
Councillor Littleton and then Councillor Harris. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of really quick questions to the deputy, through you to the deputy CAO. On page 4, it talks about, despite negotiations which have been ongoing since November 2019, the consortium members and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It talks about why they can't come to an agreement. Why is that? Or is that just normal that the agreement isn't reached? I'm just wondering is why.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, essentially the challenge for the host society at this point is they need to be focusing specifically on the games and delivering the games and working through the logistics of the delivering of the games. So when the discussion of the project agreement and then continuing to manage this project, there's an administrative element that they were concerned with. And through the discussions, that's when it was determined and agreed to that the region's probably better set up to do that. So we can, and in partnership with the municipal partners, as well as Brock University, we build buildings, and the host society is really there to deliver the game. So at that point, it was this pivot was made to allow the host society to focus on what they're good at, which is the delivering of the games, working with the provincial sport organizations, and allowing the municipal partners along with Brock to focus on the construction of the facility that we will ultimately be the owner of. So it made some logical sense at that point.
Okay, thank you. My final question is the HST, you talk about getting a rebate on that. Is it a substantial amount that it could help to offset some of the cost, or it's just nominal?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it has potential to be significant. It's essentially and there's a review happening right now to see if the host society would pay a higher percentage of contribution of HST as opposed to municipalities. So if the opportunity presents itself that there's an HST advantage, this transfer effectively allows that to happen, and it would be to the benefit of the games, a positive.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Littleton. Councillor Phillip.
Harris. Hello?
You're good to go.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Deputy CAO, if we approve this recommendation, is there any exposure to the taxpayer if there's any capital overruns with the project, if it goes over budget?
Through Mr. Mayor, the municipality, we've capped our contribution. The obligation of a capital overrun has always rested with the Niagara region. That doesn't change. But that's why we're working with the project management company to help mitigate and manage that risk. So any of that financial risk really falls to Niagara region.
Okay, my second question through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Deputy CAO is, when this was tendered and there was a timeline with expectations of when these things were supposed to be completed, when did that change when, say, the track was going to be the only thing that was completed and things like that? When did that actually change?
Through Mr. Mayor, I believe that was incorporated through an addendum within the contract, or during the tender process, where they put in the 3 phases within the contract.
Was it during the tender process or after the tender was awarded?
Through Mr. Mayor, I believe it was during the tender.
Okay. Okay. And was there any reason why construction stopped? I understood that they actually had permission to continue during the COVID stuff.
Through Mr. Mayor, the determination to stop work was made by the contractor based on the order. So they provided notice to the consortium because it's within.
And how does that affect the completion of the facilities?
Through Mr. Mayor, it has, so the 6 weeks of non-construction has affected the schedule, which is identified in the report, but they are working towards getting back on the schedule. There are protections for phase 1, as I had mentioned, but we're hoping that they're able to continue to push it through. And as we meet bi-weekly with the project manager, that's essential. Schedule and budget are the key elements right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. So I think that's it for the comments on this one. And so a motion, Councillor Phillips, would you like to make this motion? seconded.
Yep.
Okay.
Do I want to read the recommendation, Mr. Mayor?
It's on the screen in front of us, so
Yep.
that's being recorded.
I'll make that motion forthwith.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor Cisco. I'll look to the clerk to call a question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Williamson,
Yes.
Councillor Townsend, Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Harris,
Yes.
Councillor Kushner, Councillor Kushner.
Conflict of interest.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Littleton,
Yes.
Councillor Miller,
Yes.
Councillor Phillips,
Yes.
Councillor Cisco,
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento,
Yes.
and Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Okay, thanks. Again, thanks to the Deputy CAO and the team that he's been working with through legal and through Director Salter for all the work that they've been putting in. It has been countless hours, so not to underestimate the complexity of the agreements that are being signed. So I just want to say thank you to them for the work that they're doing. Number 3.3, which is St. David's Road reconstruction, city's share of costs and budget reallocation. And I'll look to Director Martuccio just to give a quick overview.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report is coming in front of council for approval for the city's share of the reconstruction project. This is a project that is being tendered by the region, and they're reconstructing the section right by the highway. And the city share is with regards to the water main, sewer, storm sewer, and the sidewalks. The road is owned by the region. There's infrastructure that is also owned by all three municipalities, which is St. Catharines, Thorold, and Niagara region. They are trying to have this work completed in anticipation of the Canada Summer Games in 2021. We did not have the full scope of the design at the time of budgeting last year. However, as I mentioned, the region is trying to get this completed in time for Canada Summer Games. So we're just looking for approval to use unused funds within other projects to accommodate the city's portion of the work.
Okay, thank you, Director Martuccio. Any questions? I got Councillor Porter and Councillor Littleton. Councillor Porter, yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Director Martuccio. I read the report several times and I tried hard to understand what happened with the design. Was there, were there unforeseen changes, or was it a poor design, or was there a problem with the estimate? Can you explain further why it's going to cost us an additional $1 million?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, it is not costing us an additional $1 million. The funding that we had put in the 2020 budget was a partial funding for the project. At the time of budgeting last year, the region had not completed their design and had not tendered it. So we were uncertain of what the city's share of the project was. It was always going to be the city's intent to include funds for the remainder of the project in the upcoming 2021 budget. However, in order to enter into an agreement with the region, we need to approve those funds now.
Okay, I understand. So it just kind of wasn't completely finished, but you want to get the project done sooner rather than later, because we have partners and everybody wants to finish it now. Am I right? Just for the public.
That's correct. We're trying to have the work completed in time for the Canada Summer Games as well.
Okay.
The roadway leads to the Canada Summer Games. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the director. Councillor Porter asked my first question, but my second question is just ensuring that this doesn't mean, when you're saying money is coming from other capital projects, is this money left over? So we're not bumping anything off to complete this one. This is just extra money that you found and reallocating.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. That these are funds that were remaining from other projects that were either tendered at lower costs or completed at lower costs, or due to just change in design scope for those projects.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Councillor Littleton. Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a very quick question. It's not clear in the report, but since the one side belongs to Thorold and the other side is ours, I assume that we're okay for any infrastructure that's on their side.
It's almost like transform.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, I didn't get that question.
Okay, I'm saying I assume there is infrastructure on both sides of the road, and on our side, we're paying for that. I assume that there is something on the other side that's Thorold's responsibility.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, there's infrastructure that's owned by all three municipalities under the road. There's infrastructure owned by the city that feeds the city or the residents of St. Catharines, and there's also infrastructure owned by the city of Thorold that feeds their residents, and there's also trunk mains that are owned by the region within the road allowance. So that's why we needed to have the design completed and tendered in order to understand who was responsible for what.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further questions, I'll look to the clerk to call the question.
Can we get the motion on the screen, Evan? We have a mover and a seconder.
I'll move it.
Councillor Harris, seconded by Councillor Littleton.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend. Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
All right, thank you for this.
It's carried unanimously.
Thank you. Great example of three municipalities coming together to fix a much overdue part of our mutual communities to facilitate the movement of people. Councillor Townsend, you're up next with, you lifted 3.4, so I'll turn over the floor to you, Councillor. 3, 2, 1, Earth be. There you go.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I pulled the airport correspondence. I first off want to let the council know that the airport is celebrating 90 years this year of operation. It's hasn't been the year that we thought it would be, starting 2020. But I would like to draw council's attention to the ACAP application that the airport has submitted. For those of you that don't know what ACAP is, it's the Airport Capital Assistance Program. It's a federal program. As a result of the airport being over 1,000 passengers over the last 3 years, the Niagara District Airport qualifies for this program. The application that the airport has submitted is for a $1.5 million funding that we've asked for, and this funding is used to assist in increasing passenger safety at the airport. The ask is to help purchase new maintenance equipment, plow truck, loader, sweeper, and blower to help increase safety around the airport. There's no cost here to the city of St. Catharines. What the ask is that we want council to support the funding application. But we'd also like to have the mayor follow up with our local members of parliament to really help support the application. The airport does continue to grow regardless of 2020. We've seen from 2017 to 2019, we're growing at a rate of about 1,000 passengers more each year. Last year, we saw about 5,400 passengers and 45,000 movements at the airport specifically. So it's quite an exciting time at the airport. A little bit more just to add to that. In June of 2020, we were supposed to be announcing a partnership with Mount Tremblant and the Quebec government. However, that has been pushed until June of 2021. Exciting things happening down at the airport, and we're hoping that council will fully endorse and support this application. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Townsend. Great work on the Airport Commission, providing a lot of update to council as we go through this. So I don't think there's any questions on this. It's pretty self-explanatory, and it's a good direction for council, for staff to follow with council's approval. So I'll look to it's moved by Councillor Townsend, seconded by Councillor Phillips.
Second it.
Councillor Phillips seconded it. So we'll go
Yes.
to the clerk for the whatever you call it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Townsend. Councillor
Yeah.
Townsend,
Yes.
Councillor Williamson,
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento,
Yes to the whatchamacallit.
Councillor Cisco,
Yes.
Councillor Porter,
Yes.
Councillor Phillips,
Yes.
Councillor Miller,
Yes.
Councillor Littleton,
Yes.
Councillor Kushner,
Yes.
Councillor Harris,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
and Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
Carried unanimously.
All right, thank you for that, Councillor Townsend. We can move on to motion to ratify forthwith recommendations that council adopt these items. If the clerk can put it on, if the council coordinator can put it on the screen. We have that the council adopts approved forthwith by general committee on Monday, June 22nd, 2020. Moving the motion to ratify forthwith, we have Councillor Miller. If I can have you moving that.
Yep. So moved.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Littleton. Thank you. And it's just a basic motion, so I guess we're not going to put it on the screen. So I'll just do all in favor verbally. Put up your hand. All in favor. Yeah, it's my little stress ball. I got a stress ball. I got it. I think we all have one of these somewhere. Okay. Now we move on to motions. So it's 10 to 9. We got some motions on the agenda. So let's see what we can do here. 10.1, and we have a speaker who will be speaking. So this is the South Drive sidewalk removal. And the first person, so we have one speaker on this, Mr. David Reed, speaking on behalf of the city's Accessibility Advisory Committee. And so he'll speak, and then if there's any questions, we'll do the same format. Put up your hand on the virtually, and then he can take questions. And once he's done speaking, and then we'll put the motion on the floor, and then we'll have a discussion. Okay. So Mr. Reed, thank you for waiting, and you've been on this journey for almost 2.5 hours now. So over to you.
More than 3.
More than 3. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I represent the Advisory Committee for Accessibility. My name has been up on the screen for quite some time now as David Reed. I've been a member of the committee for a long time, back to the days of Linda Crabtree. I am a practicing engineer, and by chance I happen to live on South Drive and have done so for the last 40 years. My position here on behalf of the Accessibility Committee is that we don't understand why motions of this nature even come to council. We have a situation where the council has endorsed all sorts of accessibility initiatives. In particular, for this one, it's been the sidewalk action statement. They've reaffirmed the sidewalk action statement, and here we are. When our position is that this is a waste of a lot of people's time. It's particularly a waste of staff time because staff has had to put together an 18-page report to justify why it is they're doing what they're supposed to do. It's a waste of council time right now, and it's a waste of my time, particularly the last 3 hours. So we are confused as a committee as to why these kind of motions even come to council. They happen each time a development it comes to the sidewalk stage. In this case, it's a retrofit. And as far as we know, the only condition or qualification for not putting in sidewalks is if it's not feasible. And clearly staff believes that it is feasible. And in addition to that, you've got a contract that's been gone through due process. It has had public consultation, or at least public information. You've tendered it, bid it, awarded it, and it's now under construction. And here somebody decides that they don't want the sidewalks. So I believe it's up to you to justify why it is that we should not follow city policy. And it so happens this afternoon or morning, I should say, on the Matt Galloway program on CBC, a lady from Etobicoke phoned in very irate about the fact that her street was going to have sidewalks built on it after many years of not having sidewalks. But the best she could do was to say that, well, there's 2 generations of kids have been brought up here and there's been no problems. Well, if that's the best that this motion can do, then I think it should be totally dismissed as being frivolous. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation and being very forthright as a member of the Accessibility Committee. And I also want to thank you for all the work, Mr. Reid, that you've put into the Accessibility Committee. We are becoming a very accessible community, and it's because of people like you that are putting your hand up to volunteer on committees to help us guide. As a person with lived experience, you're able to give us a clear picture of what accessibility really means. So with that, is there any questions of the presenter? Councillor Miller.
Hi, Mr. Reid. Thanks for your presentation. As you know, I know the area pretty well that we're talking about. I'm just curious, as the Accessibility Committee, one of the points, I guess, being made by those who don't want the sidewalks in this section is about sidewalks being on the other side of South Drive, particularly from Edgedale up to Rockcliffe. I mean, is that something, or maybe, I guess maybe you could explain why maybe that's not sufficient for accessibility?
Ask staff, it's in the city policy. I mean, the principle of these sidewalks is continuity. Now, it could easily be argued that you're not fully continuous, but that's a progress thing, or a process that if you don't do it now, then the last piece of continuity, which is Edgedale, will never be built because the previous bit didn't get built. City policy is both sides. End of story.
Fair enough. Thank you, and thanks again for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Anyone else? I don't see anyone else on their hand up. So thank you, Mr. Reid, for your presentation, and hopefully you'll stay on.
I had my hand up, Mayor Sendzik.
Can you try it? Because I don't see it on.
Hold on, I'll do it again. You see it?
Oh, you're doing the clap, or you're clapping.
Oh, that's why.
All right. Councillor Harris, you're up.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the presenter. I'm just wondering if you could comment on what the Mayor's advisory on accessibility position was when they redid Edgedale. I believe they redid it maybe 2 years ago, and for some reason the city decided not to put sidewalks in. Was the Mayor's advisory on
Accessibility Committee only deals with things that they're informed about in advance. I'm afraid we do not sit and troll meetings and things to find out. So if nobody told us then it probably flew by under the radar without even noticing, and we can't deal with that after the fact.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I totally agree with you that this is a total waste of time since there actually is a policy. What my concern is that perhaps when we actually look at these neighborhoods, maybe the mayor's advisory on accessibility should be consulted. And I'm going to ask staff after your presentation why exactly Edgedale was excluded, because that, to me, and you're familiar with the neighborhood, I think I lived across the street from you when I was a little kid. Edgedale is one of the prime streets that probably does require a sidewalk for the amount of traffic that goes down to Burgoyne Woods.
And would be safe to believe that if at some point Edgedale does get sidewalks, there's no chance of sidewalks if you don't put in, if you defer or do not put in one now. Because
exactly.
You've lost another part of the link.
Exactly. And same with Forest Hill as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Is there anybody? I'm not seeing any other hands up. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Reed, for your presentation. Very much appreciated. Now, Evan, if you can put the motion on the floor so that the public can see what we're looking at, and then we'll take a motion on the floor, then we'll take questions or comments from council. Okay, so Councillor Harris, the floor is yours, since you wanted to ask some further questions.
I guess my question would be to the Director of Transportation and Environmental Services. I guess maybe you could comment on exactly when Edgedale was done and why exactly Edgedale did not get a new sidewalk installed or any sidewalk installed, since it's the direct link to Burgoyne Woods. And if we have this policy, why wasn't this enforced on Edgedale?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have the details of why the sidewalks were not installed on Edgedale at this point in time, but I can tell you that prior to designing any construction project, we do go through and review the existing site conditions to ensure things like utilities, size of people's front yards, et cetera, are sufficient to accommodate sidewalks before that decision is made.
Okay. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Harris. Any other, let me see if there's hands up. Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have some comments about this. I do know people who live on the street who are on either side of you. I think my position on this is that we have a sidewalk policy. And if we continue to allow this to keep coming back to council, we're really doing a disservice to building a walkable city, to our accessibility committee, and we're actually pitting neighbors against each other. I think it's our responsibility to inform residents, you know, when they have questions, that this is actually the policy when we're reconstructing a road. If there's a chance and an opportunity to put in sidewalks, we put in sidewalks. I did receive a note from a resident just across the street who's in favor of this. His name is Adam. He's a professor of English at Brock, and he gave up his car 6 years ago. So he's a pedestrian and uses South Drive heavily. And he sent me a couple of comments, and he said that robust sidewalk infrastructure makes our city navigable for all people, especially those with mobility challenges. Sidewalks permit vulnerable people or dog walkers to cross the street to avoid potential encounters. The southern portion of Old Glenridge is underserved with sidewalks. As a pedestrian, I'm often forced onto the road when trying to physical distance or when trying to keep my dogs from encountering other dogs. It is a busy street, and when traffic's diverted from Glenridge, a lot of people go up South Drive, and people are forced to walk on the road, which I don't believe is safe. What else did he say? The sidewalks there are patchwork, and it's really a heavily traveled pedestrian area. And it's, from my perspective, I've looked at the street. I understand that part of South Drive is narrowed down near the one end, and it might cause a few difficulties for a couple of people with their driveways. I guess I have a question to the director, Martuccio. Can part of the sidewalk be closer to the road or the curb in those areas to help people who want to keep 2 cars in the driveway? There's a couple of, I think there are a few people on the street who are gonna struggle from going from a 2-car driveway to a 1-car driveway. Is there any way around that while continuing to build the sidewalk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it depends on what side of the street we're talking about. On South Drive, there are light standards that are right behind the curb. So sometimes the decision that we make, the distance that we put it behind the curb is because of infrastructure that is already in place, or if we're trying to avoid things such as trees or other things that might be in the boulevard. So we have to pick an alignment that is most suitable for the entire stretch of that block. And that generally drives the decision behind where the sidewalk is going to be placed.
Thank you very much. I guess my position is I thought about this. I traveled down the street. I've looked on Google Maps. I looked at some of the affected driveways. I think that although it is an inconvenience for some, it's really in the public interest to put sidewalks in this area, and that's my take on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Miller, you're up, or do you have your hand up from last time? Sorry.
No, I just have one question.
Okay.
I guess. So, like Councillor Porter, I took a look over there today. Just my question is, South Drive is about the only detour possible, just because of the geography of that area for Glenridge. So that's a lot of buses and obviously emergency vehicles maybe, and that stretch is narrow. I mean, I guess to the director, are we concerned, if we see more cars on the road, on both sides of the road or something like this, and then there's a accident, something on Glenridge, and we're routing, buses and fire trucks and things down there, that will be a concern, I suppose. I know school buses are in that area as well for being able to even access South Drive.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the design of the road was done in such a way to ensure that there was as little effect on the private residents. So therefore, the width of the road was maintained at a certain width. Maybe if you could please clarify the question.
I guess the question is, if Glenridge is shut down for some reason, as happens, once in a while, because there's an accident on that street, or construction, and we end up routing city buses, Niagara Regional Transit, I believe, travels down that section as well, down South Drive. Are we concerned with the addition of the sidewalks that those sections, like Edgedale to Forest Hill, that are already fairly narrow, will be too narrow, because there really aren't any other options in that area?
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, we're not concerned with ensuring that traffic and travel down the street. We've accommodated for all of that. If there are concerns from parked vehicles and things like that, there's other things that we can look at in the future. However, at this point in time, we have no concerns with the width of the road.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Phillips, you're up.
Yes, with this, if the sidewalks are put in, are there any trees on city property that are going to have to be removed, any mature trees?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to my knowledge, there is only one tree on South Drive that will have to be removed at this point in time. It's an evergreen that is close to the road's edge. The branches are starting to overhang on the right of way as it is now. So it should probably be removed, whether they're sidewalks or not, because it is starting to impede on the traffic on the street.
Okay, and just to follow up on what Councillor Miller, again, it's a narrow street, and if we put sidewalks in, there's going to be more people parking on the street because they don't have the driveways to handle the cars. We're sure that emergency vehicles, garbage trucks, things like that, if you have cars parked on both sides, they're going to be able to access that road at a reasonable speed if required. Is that correct?
At this time, through you, Mr. Mayor, at this time, we don't have any concerns with getting vehicles down the road. However, as I mentioned before, if those concerns do come to light, we would have to look at maybe restricting parking on one side of the street.
Yeah, I was afraid you were going to say that, because that just adds to insult to injury in a case like that, because the neighbors on this side of the street where all the cars are parked are going to be very upset if that happens. So, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Phillips. I don't see anyone else's hand.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
I see Councillor Kushner, you're up.
yes. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. The one comment I'd like to make is I certainly agree with the official plan when it comes to new developments. And in South St. Catharines now, we're having new sidewalks put on surrounding the school. And my understanding is the neighborhood is extremely supportive of that, because that'll be an improvement. It's a high traffic area. There'll be 10 more housing units. And with those housing units, because it is new, when people buy the building, they know exactly what they're getting. But I heard a comment made to the effect that this will be nothing but an inconvenience for the people living on South Drive. Well, I would suggest that's a very unfair comment, because their quality of life will be affected. They will not be able to park their cars in the driveway. When they bought their homes, there's an understanding that the driveways would continue and they would be able to park their cars. And a lot of them have commented that their children are now able to play on the front lawns, whereas if you have a sidewalk, you will reduce the greenery and it'll have an impact on their children playing. The comment was made that if you don't have a sidewalk, then that would deflect from Edgedale having sidewalks put in at a later time. And I don't accept that. Edgedale does need sidewalks because it is the main thoroughfare from Glen Ridge to Burgoyne Woods, but there's already access there with the sidewalks on the east side. And the sidewalks on the east side are somewhat problematic because they are narrow and it's very difficult for handicapped people to travel on them. And therefore, what the city is doing is they're taking out the sidewalks and putting in new sidewalks, which are wider, which will improve the practicality of people who are handicapped to travel in that area. So my opinion is this is a very established neighborhood. It's one of the most walkable neighborhoods in the city. It's a very desirable neighborhood. It's a very old neighborhood, and it functioned very well when you had a very active school in the area. So if it functioned well with the school, it should continue to function well. And to me, if we put in sidewalks, it should be an improvement to the neighborhood. And in my opinion, to put in sidewalks where the area is already established and well serviced by a sidewalk on the other side is detrimental to the community. And therefore, I can't support it. And I don't like the idea of a council telling people what is good for them. We should be asking what is good for them. And what's unfortunate, when they're first proposed, there's a public meeting and most of the residents thought the public meeting was to put in new sewers, new water lines, and to put in a park improvement. And therefore they didn't find out until quite late. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kushner. And anyone else? Because if you're not using the hands, I can't see.
I just have one more question, Mayor.
Okay.
Senzik. I guess my question would be again to the Director of Transportation Environmental Services. If where there are no existing sidewalks from Edgedale to Cliff Road, what exactly will that be connecting to at the south end?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the intent of putting those sidewalks is to allow for residents in that area to travel safely on the sidewalk. It connects to the other sidewalk network within the neighborhood. It isn't, and it does provide connection to the new park that is being put in at Partridge Park. It's just filling in or adding sidewalks where sidewalks currently don't exist, so that we can continue to build our sidewalk network in accordance with the various motions.
I guess my question is, what exactly does it connect to on Cliff Road?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Cliff Road currently has sidewalk on the one side. It just provides residents a safe route. It doesn't currently doesn't connect to anything. However, when we go to redo those streets, we will be proposing to put sidewalks in there as well.
On Cliff Road?
You're correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, I don't see any more hands up. So I guess we'll let this go to a vote and look to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, can we have a motion to receive Mr. Reed's presentation? A mover and a seconder, and just a hand vote for that first.
I'll do the motion.
Thank you.
Harris, Councillor Phillips.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. And a seconder for your motion, Councillor Harris. Is it Councillor Kushner?
I believe so.
Okay. All right. Just to remind council that it's to eliminate the new sidewalks. Okay, so you're voting to eliminate the sidewalks. Councillor Harris.
Can I just clarify? It's to eliminate the installation of brand new sidewalks, not
Correct.
to actually change the existing sidewalks. Okay.
Correct. I said to eliminate new sidewalks. Sorry. Okay. So Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Sorry, yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
No.
Councillor Miller.
No.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
No.
Councillor Cisco.
No.
Councillor Sorrento.
No.
Councillor Townsend.
No.
Councillor Williamson.
No.
Mayor Sendzik.
No.
And that's lost.
The next one on the floor is Councillor Porter. We have a presentation first. And is Councillor Porter, you want to start? Because I don't see Gervin Farron on here right now.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it's Gavin Fearon, and he works at Brock, but he's not the president of Brock. But I think
screwed that up. Sorry.
He is here.
and there are a few other Brock props who wanted to speak, and then some wires got crossed. And we've been receiving a lot of
Evan,
email communication.
I can't send him a note.
Okay, you're not on mute. Bye.
Sorry.
We've been seeing people are very passionate about this subject, and I think more passionate than a lot of us expected. And we've been getting emails up until probably right before the council meeting. So I think given the technology glitches from early on, the fact that a few more people want to speak to the matter, and the fact that I think this decision needs some time and thought, and I need to talk to some more folks, and I think the rest of council probably wants to do the same thing, and I think it's smart and wise to give council more time with this decision and the community some more time to think about it. So I would like to defer my motion until the July 13th meeting. I just want to confirm that is in fact the next meeting at 6 p.m.
That's correct.
And I just, I know I'm not supposed to speak on this too much, but I do appreciate the thoughtful emails and phone calls I've been getting for and against this motion. I actually think this is a really important community conversation that we need to have. And I would like to actually continue it, and I think we need to keep talking about it. So rather than rush it tonight, let's take some time and defer it to the next meeting.
Okay, who wants to offer an apology to Mr. Fearon? Gavin?
I already did.
Okay, Gavin, I'm going to give you an opportunity just to say you're okay with it since you sat here for 3.5 hours. So give us.
I absolutely am okay with it. I'm here to support Councillor Porter's motion, and I totally support her judgment in this matter.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I know you've sat through this for 3.5 hours, so now you know what we feel like.
Thanks. It's not my first council meeting.
Good. Okay, so we have a deferral. Is everyone okay with that? No comments on a deferral. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, that's been deferred. Councillor Garcia, do you have something you want to add? Because
I just wanted some clarification since Councilor Porter said that we needed more information. Will we be getting input from these committees she referred to in her motion? Because I think that's very important, or we have to ask for that then.
We have to ask first. So that's not something that we can do outside of council. That'll come back on July 15th with that direction.
Okay, so at that time we can give that direction that we want referral to another committee or something. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that, Councillor Porter. We move on now.
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Mayor?
Yep. What's going on?
I had my hand up.
For what though? It's a deferral. So
I know. I just wanted some clarification, and it relates to how the public, if we could somehow relate to them how they can get in contact, and if they want to come and speak or be heard or whatever, what their options are being able to do that.
Okay, we'll leave that up to the clerk when they go to publicize the next council agenda. We'll provide enough information on how to do that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Williamson? You're good, right? Yeah, okay, good. All right. We move on now to reconsideration votes. 10.3 reconsideration. So what we'll do is, Councillor Townsend, this is your motion right now, but it will be a reconsideration. So I'm just going to give you briefly the floor for a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can the reconsideration just go up on the screen quickly, just so I know which one we're, because I have two on there, so. Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, before I put this forward, I want to just ask the CAO quickly. I know that she had mentioned in the CAO's report that city staff are working with potential programs that could help alleviate those families that may be in need during this time. So before I put this forth, can that question be answered, or do I have to ask for the reconsideration first?
I'm gonna rule that the CAO can answer that one, because we may not have to go through the entire process depending on the answer.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'll actually start briefly and then I'll defer to Director Douglas. There have been some programs that are in development, which our finance department is looking into, that will help give some targeted aid to those who are specifically affected by COVID, and would help us to direct help where it's needed through an application process. But I will ask Director Douglas if there's anything further she would add. They're looking into that right now.
Thank you, through you, CAO Cabinets, and through Mr. Mayor and to the councillor. Yes, we are looking into potential programs that could assist residents who are impacted by COVID-19. There would be some eligibility criteria that would be developed, and staff can work on that and bring that forward to council for consideration.
Okay, over to you, Councillor Townsend.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Knowing that, I'm going to pull that motion off the table because there's no sense we're pushing staff to do one thing when they're already doing this. So I'll pull this motion off the table, and if I can go to my next motion, would that be okay? Can we do this? Is that, I'm not sure what the proper procedure is, but I would prefer to pull it off for now.
Good, you've pulled it, it's down.
Okay.
Move on to 10.4.
Okay, so I'm asking for reconsideration here for parking fees throughout the city. I guess the goal here would be to focus on really supporting businesses in areas where paid parking is. If there's maybe a way that we could do a 2-hour limit parking, I think as a city we should have a responsibility to further support businesses across the city. And I'm hoping that council would support even a conversation around this.
Okay, thanks for the clarification on that and some background. So it is a reconsideration, need 2/3. So we'll do a recorded vote to the city clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
No.
Councillor Porter.
No.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
No.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
No.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
No.
And Mayor Sendzik.
No.
6. And that's carried. Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's not. This is the reconsideration. It lost. So there'll be no reconsideration.
Okay. Councillor Townsend, if there is any other issues related to parking and you want to ask for further information on issues related to how we're managing the parking moving forward, you can do that under report requests.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, I think it now takes us to calls for notices of motion. Are there any? Nothing's been submitted to date. So if you do have some motions, please submit them for the next meeting of council, which is July 13th. Report requests. So Councillor Garcia.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have a report request. I wonder if they can put it up on the screen. I sent it to the clerk earlier. If not, I can read it.
Oh, it's coming up.
Okay. Okay, so this is partly in response to a very good letter we got from the Coalition for a Better Niagara, but also the fact that I think it's an issue that of interest to all of us, councilors and the public. So I'm asking that staff prepare a report addressing all issues related to holding public meetings given the current conditions, and in particular, how will we allow the public to properly participate in the debate of critical issues involving very large potential expenditures such as CIP. And I will leave it up to the Director of Planning, I guess, to give us a timing on when we could get this.
Okay, so this is a report request. And council can see. So I don't know if Director Kite wants to provide some context.
I can do that. Thank you. So through the mayor to the councillor, there is a subgroup right now of the Municipal Emergency Control Group that's working on a report just like this to inform council of all the various ways that we're working on public consultation. This would look like a duplication of those efforts. Furthermore, we are exploring a multitude of different ways that we are engaging with the public through COVID. Throughout the years, planning departments have been rightfully wrongfully accused of not undertaking appropriate engagement when we follow what the rule of the law says under the Planning Act. What COVID has done is given us an opportunity to use various different technologies and methods of consulting with the community. We absolutely realize and understand that larger projects such as the CIP warrants more conversation, and it deserves that, but dictating what that engagement looks like this early in the process would also not be appropriate at this time. When we look at revising that work plan, we will include a multitude of different avenues for public consultation. I'm not sure spending the time writing a report on doing public consultation is entirely necessary, when I'd rather spend those efforts, those critical resources that we have right now, on actually undertaking those engagement efforts. But if it's council's will, I'm happy to prepare the report or work with the control group on perhaps a planning section if necessary.
No, that's acceptable, Mr. Mayor and Director, as long as we will, as a council, be reviewing all those options that you're looking at if and when you get them ready. And we're assured that nothing major like this is going to be coming up until we get those alternatives from you and agree on what's appropriate.
Okay, I got Councillor Phillips and then Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to add to what Councillor Garcia just asked for, and I requested the same thing in regards to a report or what we're going to do in regards to the Airbnb mess, and I use that term strategically, I guess, that we're in. We need to get this going real soon, because we all have people who want to express their views, whether it be CIP or Airbnb, and we're getting phone calls, and I'm referring these reports or these emails to the Director of Planning all the time. And I'm told that we can't do anything until we have a public meeting. Well, we have to have a public meeting real soon. So I really hope that this can get done soon, so we can get something done to help the people out who badly need it. And as I said last weekend in Port Weller East, the Airbnb situation was terrible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To the Director of Planning, I believe the first public meeting under the Planning Act during the pandemic is in July. You just confirm that, and this should be of interest to all of us, because maybe we can make sure that we do a good job informing the public as councillors, and we can test it out. I'm wondering if the accessibility has anyone reached out to the accessibility committee to see if they have thoughts and opinions on like Zoom meetings for public meetings. I think that there is potentially in some ways better accessibility, because you don't have to leave your house to participate. So we might think that there's a barrier for some, but it might actually open up public meetings for many other people. So I wonder if the Director could answer that first question on when the first public meeting under the Planning Act is, and it would be a good opportunity for us to take a look at that as councillors.
Director Kite.
Thank you, Councillor. And through the Mayor to the Councillor, I'm just trying to dig up that notice. But yes, that's correct. The first statutory open house we will be holding is for 268 Oakdale. I can't seem to put my finger on the date right now, but I'm happy to advise Council separately. Notice was provided earlier this month, back on June 15th. We are exploring, so we do have the legal authority to hold statutory public meetings online. It's a tool that we're going to be using, a very similar platform to what we're using here for a council meeting. It's also very similar to what we've been doing with the Committee of Adjustment meetings. We were the first municipality in the Greater Toronto Area to undertake Committee of Adjustment meetings and getting that moving. So I know our residents who access that service, as well as builders have very much appreciated that. And it has worked. We have been able to have people do presentations and people do delegations. People are directed to the website where they can view information in advance, and they're also provided with contact information for staff to have one-on-one conversations, all of which I would argue would be better engagement than standing in a room and maybe not having access to people and only having a 1-hour open house. We're actually, in a sense, when we do online consultation, we're extending that period that we can have those important conversations with the public. And I think that's really important. So I don't think it's accurate to say that only in-person open houses are of value to the community. I don't agree with that. I think that's what the community is used to, and that's what has been previously specified in the Planning Act. What COVID has taught us is this is a good time for us to try and practice different technologies, different methods of reaching out to different people. So we do have the statutory open house coming up for 268 Oakdale, and then there's a non-statutory online open house that we will be doing for some open space areas in Port Dalhousie through the Lincoln Fabrics and the Legion properties. So we are trying to use technology to do different methods of engagement, and we're hopeful that they'll be successful. And once we go through these practice rounds, then we'll know what we can continue to work with, what we can continue to refine, and how we can continue to gauge the community using the multitude of tools that we have available to us, also including our Engage SDC platform.
Thank you, Director Katea. I'll just end by saying construction is going to be crucial for our recovery during the pandemic. So we need to find a way to have these public meetings. Kudos to the Committee of Adjustment for all of the work they're doing to keep projects running. And I just wanted to remind Council, we did have 2 public meetings about the CIP already when staff were writing it, and there were very few councillors there. And it's important as councillors that we let the community know that these meetings are happening at the time. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for that. And I would echo Councillor Porter and Councillor Phillips. We need to actually get public engaged in this technology. We shouldn't be waiting for in-person only. We got to be able to move on big. I'm thinking a bigger expenditure is going to be our budget for 2021, and I don't think we'll be able to get together in large groups. So utilizing technology is going to be the way forward. So whether it's CIP, Airbnb, we got the interim control bylaw for marijuana grow ops. Like we've got to get people engaged now. And we shouldn't be pushing things off because of the way we used to do things. We've got to make sure they get engaged more actively now in this platform. So by the sounds of it, I don't think we need the report. I think the Director of Planning has been very clear. And then if there's any questions that come up, maybe Councillor Garcia, you can forward your questions. But do you want
that's fair, Mr. Mayor. I think the Director made it clear, and I trust her word on that. So.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Councillor Garcia. So we'll pull that one down. And I think we now go into ABCs, agencies, boards, committee reports. Councillor Harris, you have a motion to receive and file the minutes. Are you with us still? I don't hear the birds chirping anymore. So,
Mr. Mayor, can I just say that the date for that open house is July 16th?
Yes, you can say that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Councillor Sorrento, can you move the ABCs?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Kushner, can I get you to second that?
Seconded, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, these are the minutes of the advisory committees of council. Any questions? Not seeing any. All in favor, show of hands. Any opposed? Seeing none. Okay, we have some board updates. I talked to Councillor Dodge, AMO. You've been getting a lot of information on AMO, so I don't think there's anything there. Transit, we heard from the CAO about transit. If there is, Councillor Dodge, do you have anything to add to what or Councillor Miller? CAO.
Mr. Mayor, I have nothing to add right now.
Okay. The library was touched on by the CAO as well. So if is there anything there you want to touch on? Councillor Littleton?
No, the main points were raised by the CAO. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for Councillor Littleton. Councillor Williamson, anything related to folk arts?
Sorry. Yes, just a point of information. We're going through some training right now with the board, and it's to do with it's some coaching from external source, and it's been really great. And it's actually going to be developing board policies and how the board can run more efficiently. So that's actually a really great exercise that we're going through, and I sit on the subcommittee involved with that. So there's 3 meetings with the whole board, and there's 3 meetings for the subcommittee. So just sharing that.
Thank you. Okay, so PAC, is there anything to report?
We haven't had a meeting, Mr. Mayor, board meeting. I'm on the finance committee, and we'll have a finance committee meeting before the next board meeting, but it's some time away yet, unless my colleague, Councillor Townsend, has anything to report.
Nothing to report at this time. Next meeting, though, yes.
Okay. We got hydro downtown we've heard about. Is there anything else, Councillor Sorrento, on the downtown? Are you good?
I'm good, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Wine festival, Councillor Phillips, anything? I know they
just the wineries. We had a meeting, virtual meeting last week. The wineries are reporting that their sales are doing quite well online and at the store. Now that they're opening more, I'm sure they'll be very happy with that. As far as the festivities are concerned, Dory Anderson is doing a great job. I think everything's going to be going viral in that regards. And with the Niagara Symphony, we have a meeting tomorrow night, so I have nothing to report.
Okay. Thank you very much. I could say that the CAO and myself, Councillor Harris, we were on the AGM for Electra. They held their AGM last week, and again, very informative about what Electra, which for those as a refresher, we're shareholders in that. It's the second largest utility distribution company in Canada. It's one of the largest in North America. A significant amount of work has gone into the merger, and they gave us a very clear picture of how they're dealing with COVID-19, how they're working with area residents in terms of their billing, and also working with their staff, and how they've migrated to a pretty much remote only access point for their staff. And they also have updated their strategic plan, because obviously these measures are going to be impacting on the overall corporate growth of that company. So it was very informative to be a part of that. And I just want to thank Councillor Harris for his role as a board member, and also acknowledge that as a shareholder, we've got what I think consider to be a strong management team that's working with Electra. So that's pretty much it for the board updates. And we've done the in-camera. We have a motion arising from in-camera, and the motion from in-camera is to receive the report as presented in the in-camera related to Realty File 8502, and it be received for information purposes. So Councillor Littleton, I believe you were making that motion in camera, and seconded by Councillor Miller. Okay, and I'll look to the clerk for a recorded vote.
Hear you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter. Councillor Porter.
Sorry, my audio went out and I had to leave the meeting to come back. You just tell me what we're voting on.
This is on the in-camera motion for the Realty File.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Harris, you're not in the room. And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Okay, so we have reading of bylaws. That bylaws listed on council agenda A to H, save and accept bylaw C, be read for the first time, considered and passed, and that they be signed and executed by the mayor and city clerk. And I have Councillor Cisco, you're pitching up on that one.
So moved.
Thank you. And Councillor Porter, you're up on that one. as a seconder.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, look to the clerk to call the vote on that one.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Cisco,
Aye.
Councillor Porter,
Yes.
Councillor Phillips,
Yes.
Councillor Miller,
Yes.
Councillor Littleton,
Yes.
Councillor Kushner,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento,
Yes.
Councillor Townsend,
Yes.
Councillor Williamson,
Sorry, yes.
and Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Okay, so we just have one additional one, that a bylaw to authorize a regional relief and recovery fund contribution agreement with the Tourism Association of Ontario. One reading with respect to receipt of funding to enable recovery from economic disruptions associated with COVID-19 outbreak, delegation bylaw 2004-277 as amended. And so I'm looking to Councillor Sorrento for the approval on this one.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
And then seconded by Councillor Townsend. Thank you. Look to the clerk for a recorded vote.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Cisco,
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento,
Yes.
Councillor Townsend,
Yes.
Councillor Williamson,
Yes, sorry.
Councillor Porter,
Yes.
Councillor Phillips,
Yes.
Councillor Miller,
Aye.
Councillor Littleton,
Yes.
Councillor Kushner,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
and Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Okay. Now we have adjournment. So before we adjourn, I just want to thank everybody for, this has been a productive meeting. We had some technical challenges, and I just want to say thank you to Evan. For those of you who aren't in City Hall, the amount of pressure that he was facing trying to get this meeting up and running was very evident. I don't want to say he was freaking out, but he was close to freaking out. But we all held in. And so I want to thank also our presenters who came in, Mr. Reed and Mr. Fioron, for sticking it out with us, and for the public. So Councillor Garcia, are you looking to move the adjournment?
No, I just wanted to ask a very quick procedural question of the clerk, and that is, we haven't discussed it, but this has been a long meeting. Do we have a curfew for these meetings like we did with the ones live?
Yes, they would still be at 10:30. So it would be, I don't want to speak for the clerk, but it would still be part of the
Okay.
council approach. So I appreciate the question, and
Thank
maybe
you.
we'll keep that in mind for July 13th.
Okay.
We have the big meeting.
Let's just not start the meeting at 2:00 in the afternoon. 10:30 is a long meeting.
Yeah, you got that right. Okay, so with that, a motion to adjourn. Councillor Cisco, Councillor Townsend, and all in favor. Have a great night, folks. Hopefully we'll get to see everybody in person soon. Take care.
Night, everyone.